Hi there, my name's Eddie, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Wolfsbane Witch. And today I'm going to be sharing with you my 5 most unconventional witchcraft tools. Some of these tools are going to be things that are used in some witchcraft practices, but seem to not be as common that I see in a lot of people's practices. Others will be things that I've never seen anyone use in their practice and that I find kind of unique or unconventional in the way that I use it or in the item itself. I figured I'd share this just to show off some of the items I have and some of the more unique ways that I use them. So I'm going to be counting down from 5 up to 1, and the order's going to go from what I consider the least unconventional to the most unconventional. So definitely stick around till the end. So number 5 would be books and foraging guides. Now for books I use things like fiction books, children's books. I really like to use anthology series like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, or stories like Shakespeare, or different things like that that typically have themes or more flowery visual language. And what I'll use this for is bibliomancy. Bibliomancy is typically used with Bibles, but it can also be used with any sort of book. You can use it through one-word divinations where you flip to a page and then point to a word and then you use that word. Or you could flip to a page, read the page, use the page for divination, or flip to the page and then read the whole story if you're using an anthology. I really like using the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, one because I love the sort of creepy language that they impart and the sort of esoteric feel of it all. But I also like that a lot of the stories in them also come from traditional folklore or urban legends or across the world. And a lot of them also have a moral to them, so I could use the moral of the story to help me understand the moral of the divination or the lesson of the divination that I'm doing. I don't use foraging guides for bibliomancy, but I do use them in my practice when it comes to foraging for wild spell ingredients, for kitchen witchery, or just wild ingredients in general. Typically what you'll find is that a lot of the edible plants or forageable plants are also plants that are used in healing magic or magic in general. Not always though. Sometimes you'll find baneful plants that don't really fall under this, but most non-baneful plants are within this category of forageable, edible foods. Foraging guides can really come in handy because they oftentimes will have little recipes inside them, so you can use that for your kitchen witchery. It will also sometimes have different historical uses of plants. So for instance, on the page for staghorn sumac in my foraging book for the state of Virginia, it talks about how some Native American tribes will dry sumac leaves and smoke them alongside tobacco. So you could use something like this to help further your understanding of sumac or to possibly use it in your spiritual practice as well, depending on different cultural contexts and such. So there's a lot of different ways you can use a foraging guide to help inform your practice of herbology or of any sort of plant-based magic, especially when it comes to kitchen magic or any sort of outdoors type thing. And speaking of smoking things, my 4th unconventional item is this. This is a wooden carved pipe, and I use this to smoke for ritual purposes. Some of the things I might smoke for ritual purposes might include mixtures. I typically don't smoke just one particular thing, so some of the mixtures I might make might include tobacco, lavender, mugwort, a little bit of cannabis. Hey, it's legal here. Sometimes rose petals. I've smoked tea before, chamomile. There's a couple other things too that I haven't tried, like blue lotus and raspberry leaves I've heard you can smoke as well. But typically I'll use certain things like that to induce a trance, or right before sleep to induce more lucid, vivid dreams when it comes to deity work or something like that. I also do use the smoke of the smoking in my witchcraft. I might blow the smoke onto something to consecrate it. I might blow the smoke to blow away something or to blow something out of me. I might inhale the smoke in order to invite something into me. So it does have ritual purposes and it does have magical purposes, but if it's not your thing, I totally understand. Number 3 is toys. Specifically, I'm just going to be talking about this. This is a little D10 die that I use, and I use this for numerology divination. Typically, I use this with Loki. So what I'll do is I'll, cast the die, and whatever number it lands on, I'll use the number and the significance of that number to read into a meaning. I could also use it for yes or no's by using even or odd numbers. I can use it to mean, failure or accomplishment by, getting a 0 or a 1. 0, by the way, on a d10 typically stands for a 10. But it can be 0 depending on how you use it. Since you're not using it for D&D in this context, you can kind of use it however you want, I guess. So, that's food for thought, I suppose, is using dice. Dice aren't the only, random toys that I've used. I've also used, a worm on a string as a pendulum for Loki. I also have this. That's also for Loki. Loki and toys, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I just like using kind of random fun things in my practice if I can. It kind of helps keep me engaged and keep me playful. I think that spirituality sometimes can get this reputation of being very serious, but I kind of like to have fun with it sometimes. And one of the ways I really like to have fun with it is I am a theater kid. For anyone who doesn't know, when I was in college, I minored in theater. I love theater, and I have always loved dressing up in costumes and very elaborate things like that. I'm quite theatrical, what can I say? And one of the things I love to do is when I invoke a deity, which I don't do very often, but when I do, I like to dress up as the deity or something similar. This is actually something that was done in antiquity quite often, so it's not that far off or that strange, but I don't see a lot of witches doing it in modern day. I don't do this with most of my deities. I do it with a couple of them, specifically the ones who are often associated with theater, so I do it with Dionysus, and I also do it with Pan. And for Pan, I have these little horns that I will put on with some spirit gum, and I also have hooves that I will wear. And I also have satyr legs that I will wear while I'm wearing these, and while I invoke him. Dressing up as a spirit is not necessary to invoke a spirit into your body or to invoke for any reason like that. I just find it an easier way to help when it comes to spirit embodiment, especially when it comes to a deity. It helps welcome the deity. It helps make sure that that particular energy is getting into you. And it also helps you kind of feel more like the deity. It helps you visualize in a way. I also really like to wear medieval garb and stuff like that during solstices or something like that. I don't do it quite often. It's just something that makes me feel witchy and dramatic and theatrical, and it helps me get into that ritual mindset and that very strong, powerful, mystical mindset. Especially being in sort of medieval clothes or more mystical creature-like makeup or costume, it helps me feel less like Eddie, the guy who, works a job and has a YouTube channel and, has to feed his cat in the morning. It helps me get out of that mundane space and get into the more mystical, ethereal, esoteric mindset. And before I move on to number 5, I'm just going to give out a couple honorable mentions. So honorable mention number 1, music playlists. Some of the deities I work with, I will make music playlists of them and I will put it on shuffle and I will use those playlists or the songs that come on shuffle as a way to communicate with them. I really like doing this with Loki, but I've also done this with Pan, I've done this with Hecate, and I've also done this with Dionysus. If I'm doing spell work or meditations, or if I'm just thinking about those deities, I might also put on that music, and it's kind of a way to show respect to the deity. I could play that music in honor of the deity and, tell them it's for them as an act of reverence or as an act of respect. So that's something I kind of do that I think is a little unconventional, although I have heard of other witches doing it. Another honorable mention is using feathers for directing energy, using images or mirrors for manifestation, using a crock pot as a cauldron, one of my favorite things to do. I love my crock pot. Using pens, pencils, paintbrushes, or any other sort of tool as a wand or as a magical instrument. Using my voice as a magical instrument, or using my voice as a way to charm something or someone. And also using pins. I will use pins for protection, for warding, or even, like in the case of this little gargoyle to invoke a little spirit into, particularly my familiar, so that way I can carry him around and keep him around wherever I am, and he can be there and I can invoke him whenever I need him. Okay, with the honorable mentions out of the way, now it's time for number 1, my most unconventional witchcraft tool. This one's actually a fairly new one. I got this around Halloween time for a steampunk costume that I got. It was just sitting around as a decor piece, and I thought, you know what? I could probably use this for magic. And so I did. Or at least I'm going to be. So this is what it is. It's a little steampunk 1800s style gun, and it is completely fake. The only thing it can do, you can't load it, there's no mechanisms to it. The only thing you can do is that and that. So, you know, it's very simple. It's basically a replica, a toy thing. But I thought it looked really cool and could be used for magical purposes, so what I'm going to be using it for is as a blasting rod. Now, typically what a blasting rod would be like a wand or a staff that you would use to exorcise, banish, hex, curse, or otherwise get rid of something evil, baneful, malicious, whatever. But, you know, I'm from America, and in America, if you got a problem with something, you shoot it. And honestly, like, what's more terrifying? Like, if you're a spirit and someone points a stick at you, are you gonna be intimidated? I don't think so. Here's Mike thinking. If I'm an evil spirit and you point a stick at me, I'm gonna laugh at you. But if I'm an evil spirit and you point a gun at me, I'm probably gonna get the hell out. And if not, I can use this to project my magic. So instead of blasting them with my wand, you know, using that to visualize, I can visualize like a magical bullet, essentially, destroying them, dispersing them, or what have you. But yeah, so I think this is my most recent tool, and probably my most unconventional one as well. If you also work with unconventional tools, or if you have any comments on how I could use my unconventional tools that I've shown you so far, definitely let me know in the comments. If you've subscribed to my channel already, thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't and you'd like to, definitely go ahead. I post a new video every weekend. And thank you so much for watching if you've watched this far, and of course, have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one.